Welcome to the Culture Ward, where we dissect and dismember pop culture in all its forms. Apparently Disney's having trouble trying to win over young men. They're therefore looking for new, original content that appeals to this demographic. But doesn't Disney already own some pretty male-centered brands, I hear you ask? Why would the company that owns Star Wars and Marvel ever be worried about attracting men? Well, let's find out, shall we? Though, I think you probably already know the answer. Before we begin, please take a second to hit that subscribe button, help us grow the channel, and don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoy the content. Now let's get into it. So Disney's been around for a long time. Founded in 1923 by brothers Walt and Roy Disney, the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio was created as an animation studio first and foremost. Later renamed Walt Disney Studio and Walt Disney Productions, it established itself as the leader in animation by 1928 with their first synchronized sound cartoon, Steamboat Willie, featuring its perennial mascot, Mickey Mouse. In 1934, Disney committed to feature film production as well, resulting in the 1937 release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which was a huge success and set the standard for animated feature films going forward. It was followed by Pinocchio and Fantasia in 1940, Dumbo in 1941, and Bambi in 1942, all of which were critical successes, earning multiple Academy Award nominations between them. The early 1940s also saw Disney diversifying into live-action films, television, and theme parks, such as Disneyland and Disney World. Beginning in the mid-1960s, and coinciding with Walt Disney's death in 1966, Disney began to see declining profits, especially in animation, despite the creation of some memorable films, such as Robin Hood and the Aristocats. In the early 1980s, Disney rather forcibly restructured when Walt Disney's nephew, Roy E. Disney, left the company and launched a campaign called Save Disney, ultimately succeeding in ousting Disney leadership and bringing in Michael Eisner and Frank Wells to run the company. This restructuring led to a resurgence of the company's popularity, with the international expansion of Disney theme parks and what's been called the Disney Renaissance period in animation, which included the creation of some of the highest-grossing animated films in history between 1989 and 1999. In 2005, Bob Iger was voted in as CEO, and he continued Disney's growth, first acquiring Pixar in 2006, with whom Disney had previously scored some really big hits such as Toy Story and Finding Nemo, followed in 2009 with the acquisition of Marvel Entertainment, Lucasfilm in 2012, and 21st Century Fox in 2019. However, despite having become the largest entertainment conglomerate in history, with some of the most valuable IPs ever, Disney has, for the past several years, been struggling to keep their heads above water, at least as it concerns film and television. It all began sometime around 2015 to 2016. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe was still sailing high in 2016, cracks would begin to show soon after. Likewise, Star Wars The Force Awakens had just made a fortune at the box office, and some fans' hopes were pretty high that Disney would be revitalizing George Lucas's legendary franchise. But something happened in 2016 that seemed to fundamentally change the trajectory of these enormous cinematic juggernauts. While I can't quite put my finger on it, it seemed to coincide with a certain election and the collective reactions that followed. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe continued to pump out blockbuster movies until 2019's Avengers Endgame. But by this time, there were some hints that things behind the scenes were changing. In June of 2018, for instance, Kevin Feige, head of Marvel Studios, was quoted as saying the MCU would soon have more female heroes than male ones. He additionally assured the public that LGBT representation was an important consideration going forward. In other words, Marvel would begin to look a lot different. Well, we started seeing glimpses of the new Marvel with Captain Marvel, which had been pitched as the first female-led superhero movie and featured a pair of female screenwriters. And while the movie ultimately made over $1 billion at the box office, this was most likely because it was marketed as necessary backstory for Avengers Endgame. The movie was actually pretty terrible, with the female lead who was insufferable, played by an insufferable actress, and who was the very definition of a Mary Sue. Likewise, Ant-Man and the Wasp should have been renamed The Wasp and Ant-Man, since Ant-Man was essentially demoted to supporting character in his own film to make room for the stronger, smarter, and better female superhero. And this was only the beginning. The shift in MCU priorities actually followed a much more abrupt shift in Marvel Comics, with the introduction of all new, all different Marvel around 2015. In the comics, we saw a shift toward heavy-handed identity politics, including overt sexualization of characters with a heavy emphasis on diversity and LGBT inclusion. Coincidentally, or not, this all-new Marvel era brought about an almost immediate collapse of the comic industry. After Avengers Endgame and the launch of Disney's streaming platform Disney+, there was a pretty steady stream of terrible films and streaming series pumped out at breakneck speed. Almost perfectly mirroring the failed strategy in the comics division, Marvel Studios leaned heavily into identity politics and social messaging, pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the most ham-handed way possible, while sacrificing good storytelling in exchange for social justice points. Press junkets no longer talked about the thrilling stories or the compelling characters or interesting concepts, instead praising the diversity, the bold visions of filmmakers from vulnerable and marginalized groups, gender expectations, and representation.
Representation.
Deaf representation.
More inclusive.
Representation matters.
Representations.
Representations. Representation.
Every project was marketed as the first something, the first Egyptian female superhero, the first non-binary character, the first gay kiss, the first gay marriage, the first deaf, dumb, disabled, indigenous amputee. It was exhausting. And as a result, Marvel saw a string of diverse, blockbuster flops like Black Widow, The Eternals, Shang-Chi, The Marvels, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Captain African American, and with the garbage that has been shat out for Disney+, the platform has still yet to turn a profit. Likewise, we have seen a similar trajectory for Lucasfilm under the ownership and direction of Disney. While The Force Awakens was a proper blockbuster, it was so mainly because it had been more than a decade since the last Star Wars movie, and audiences had been teased of the return of the main cast, including Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker, Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia, and Harrison Ford's Han Solo. What we got, however, was not what we were promised. Not one single scene in the movie with all three main stars together. And the film instead focused on a new protagonist, Rey, just Rey, and her lost puppy Finn. And they not only ruined Han Solo's character by erasing his entire story arc from the original trilogy, but then they killed him off without him so much as putting up a fight. In 2016, there was once again hope in the Star Wars brand when Rogue One was released. This movie was actually really good, and it felt like a proper Star Wars film, but then came 2017, and the release of The Last Jedi. Any goodwill that still remained was almost completely eliminated by this 5-gallon bucket of vomit. Not only was the story dumb, and the characters were dumb, and Finn was reduced to comic relief, and Poe was completely emasculated, and the strong female leaders were girl-bossing their way across the galaxy, but they destroyed another legacy character, Luke Skywalker, in what is probably the worst character assassination in the history of storytelling. And I, as well as many others, will never forgive them for that. With Carrie Fisher's tragic death in 2016, Harrison Ford's advancing age and open contempt for Star Wars, as well as the gradual mental breakdown of Mark Hamill over the past few years,
Force be with you. Unless you're MAGA, then you can go force yourself.
there will never be another opportunity, absent AI, to make a decent homage to these iconic characters. Disney had one chance, and they squandered it. Then in 2019, The Rise of Skywalker limped into theaters and finally nailed shut the coffin on George Lucas's legacy. What an absurd, ridiculous mess of a film. While there were no more legacy characters to murder, there were still plenty of stupid retcons, pointless nostalgia, and preposterous plot points, including the return of Emperor Palpatine.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Thus rendering the entire original trilogy and Anakin Skywalker's character arc practically meaningless. Besides the sequel trilogy, which no doubt alienated a large portion of the fan base, Lucasfilm was also called upon to provide a large quantity of content for Disney+. While they did manage to create a couple decent seasons each of The Mandalorian and Andor, practically everything else they created, which was not an insubstantial amount, was an appalling collection of shit, from Ahsoka to Obi-Wan Kenobi to the third season of The Mandalorian to, perhaps worst of all, The Acolyte. Not only did these shows suck ass, they also did additional, irreparable damage to the Star Wars brand, and managed to drive away most of whatever audience still tuned in. Besides Star Wars, other Lucasfilm IPs were also demolished, like Indiana Jones, with the abysmal fifth entry in that franchise, Indiana Jones and the Diarrhea of Destiny, or the Dial of Dysentery, or the Diaper of Dingleberry, or whatever it was called. And Willow, with a series that was so bad that even Disney has tried to erase it from history by completely removing it from Disney Plus almost as soon as the last episode aired. As previously stated, Disney, like so many other entertainment and media companies, have spent the last several years mired in identity politics and social messaging, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and political pandering. One of the most obvious messages they have been pushing is that straight white men are to be dismissed, denigrated, and despised, and most importantly, de-centered. Instead, powerful smart women have been used to replace powerful smart men at nearly every turn. Hawkeye was replaced with Kate Bishop, Thor was one-upped by Lady Thor, Loki by Lady Loki, Iron Man by Ironheart, Black Panther by teeny tiny Lady Black Panther, Hulk by She-Hulk, Luke Skywalker, and all the other male Star Wars characters by Rey, Indiana Jones by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Willow by Elora Danan, etc., etc., etc. In films such as Black Widow and the Marvels, as well as streaming series such as The Acolyte, Ahsoka, Echo, all of which were dominated by female cast, the only men, at least white and or straight men, were usually portrayed as either weak, stupid, or evil, or some combination thereof. In other words, men, especially white straight men, have been specifically and emphatically replaced, ignored, or villainized. And now here we are in 2025 staring down the barrel of another collection of underperforming content by Disney. Captain America Brave New World underperformed. Thunderbolts also underperformed. Fantastic Four, by far the best Marvel project this year and which has performed the best of them all, is still struggling to break even. It may eke out a profit, but it won't be much of one. Disney did have a hit earlier this year with the live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch, but the profits from that movie were probably just about swallowed by the abysmal failure of Snow White, which was one of the biggest bombs of the year. Then there was Ironheart on Disney+, which was actually finished in 2023, but kept on the shelf for more than 2 years because even Marvel knew it was shit. In other words, Disney's not having a great year. The summer box office has been officially called a failure, not even breaking $4 billion, in a year that was supposed to be a return to form. And it's not like this is the first year either. Pretty much every year since COVID has been bad for Disney, with the possible exception of 2024, which saw Inside Out 2, Moana 2, and Mufasa, all sequels that performed well. In the midst of their despair, they are now looking for answers. It was recently reported that Disney is worried about its shrinking popularity with men and wants to try and grow their male audience. So this article in Variety, titled Disney's Boy Trouble, Studio Seeks Original IP to Win Back Gen Z Men Amid Marvel Lucasfilm Struggles. Alright, Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty aren't the only ones looking for a prince. Leadership at Walt Disney Studios has been pressing Hollywood creatives in recent months for movies that will bring young men back to the brand in a meaningful way. Young men is defined here as ages 13 to 28, aka Gen Z. First, every film studio is looking for better ways to convert young audiences into habitual moviegoers. Numerous studies show that Gen Z men in particular are a lonely, gaming-obsessed group who were hampered in their formative years by COVID-19 lockdowns. Alright, so they're focused on young men, and the first thing they do is to insult the men that they're hoping to woo by calling them basically incels. That's a bold strategy.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
But what's surprising producers, writers, and other partners in the larger industry is that Disney has been calling for original concepts to lure the demo back to the movies. This is the same Disney whose multi-billion-dollar content engines, Marvel and Lucasfilm, have sated men of all ages over almost 2 decades since the company acquired them. Disney has been seeking new IP and pitches such as splashy global adventures and treasure hunts, as well as seasonal fare like films for the Halloween corridor. The calls come as the Star Wars machine struggles to produce any film project, and the superhero genre sheds audiences by the minute. While insiders say the mandate to recruit young males goes as high as the C-suite, the task primarily has fallen on David Greenbaum, co-head brought on in 2024 to run Disney's live-action film business. That label has been sorely lacking in guy-leaning fare, like the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, for nearly 10 years. To say nothing of the lackluster attempt to reboot and hand off Indiana Jones in 2023, which earned $383 million worldwide on a $300 million budget before marketing costs. A Disney source says that movies for Gen Z men are part of an overall strategy across all labels, but no more urgent than any other quadrant. Alright, let's just stop right there. So they're looking for original content to engage these young incels, I mean men. At least the writer of this article notices how strange it is that a company that owns both Lucasfilm and Marvel need to search for new original content to interest young men. I mean, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, superhero movies, these are some of the biggest boy brands in history. As one user on X so perfectly noticed, quote, "If you're struggling to get boys to watch your stuff when you own Marvel, Star Wars, and Indiana Jones, you don't belong in the audience business." Well said, Senator Tim Whatley, whoever you are. At least we agree on one thing. Alas, as the article notes, all of these properties are struggling to produce content to win over men. Well, or any other audience for that matter. Well, why is that? Is it because young men, or men in general, are no longer interested in such trivialities as space battles or superheroes? Or is it because Disney has systematically, with deliberate intent, alienated men from these brands, pushing them out in favor of girl bosses and LGBT heroes? Marvel and Lucasfilm are boy brands. They are the boy brands. They always were and always will be. While some percentage of the audience has always been female, and no doubt some percentage gay too, most of those people were fans of Star Wars and Marvel the way they already were. No pandering required. But Disney, in all its infinite wisdom, decided to try and make those boy brands into girl brands, not only losing a large chunk of their male audience, but also the female audience that already liked it the way it was. As at least one YouTuber has noted, they took a boy brand that everyone liked and turned it into a girl brand that nobody likes, literally snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And now they're lost in the dark, desperately searching for some content to win over a male audience, when all they need to do is give us back our toys. You can still turn this around, Disney. It may take some time to heal, and some mea culpas on your part, like maybe doing the unthinkable and bringing George Lucas back to help for a little while. But I guarantee you that myself and many other men that grew up with Star Wars and Marvel comics, as well as our sons and daughters who we raised on these properties, will come to see these IPs return to form. Rebuild them, and they will come. As for younger men, Gen Z, well, I'm no expert, but I would say, first and foremost, maybe stop calling them deranged incels.
That was the plan. Not a great plan.
Then, stop making movies that demonize and degrade men and boys in general. Stop Mary Suing every movie and replacing legacy male characters with stronger, smarter, and better at everything female ones. Stop lecturing them about toxic masculinity and identity politics. And it wouldn't hurt to feature a few attractive women who, actually look attractive. And finally, you should, at least occasionally, actually listen to the lonely, gaming-obsessed, growth-stunted boys when they tell you what they want. Because they do. If there's one true thing about lonely, gaming-obsessed boys, it's that they are online a lot, voicing their opinions. Maybe listen to them. So listen up, Disney. Whether you find some new golden goose man-centered IP, or realize that the ones you already own have the potential to once again be the biggest man-centered IPs, one of the most important things to remember is the concept of a target audience. Men and women like different things in general. The creators of Top Gun Maverick and Barbie both knew that rule. They thus tailored their films for their target demographics, and it paid off. You have to do that as well. And there will always be overlap. Some girls like boy stuff and vice versa. But don't cater to that minority. Don't pander to them. Not only will it drive away the target audience, it will likely drive away the overlapping minority as well. Remember, if you try to make something for everyone, you usually end up with something for no one. So that's my advice to you, Disney. Take it or leave it. Anyway, what do you think? Do you think that Disney needs some new original content to win over young men? Or should they just stop turning all the boy toys into girl toys? Join the conversation in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye for now. We hope to see you next time in the Culture Ward.